Is offshore wind power the answer to Europe's energy and climate dilemma? With depleting fossil fuels and worries over energy security, Europe faces the challenge of replacing ageing power plants and finding new energy sources of its own. At a conference in Stockholm, the European Wind Energy Association launched a new report, Oceans of Opportunity, which claims that offshore wind could power Europe 7 times over.
Offshore wind is Europe's largest domestic energy resource. It is free from greenhouse gases, it requires no domestic or imported fuel, and it creates jobs here in Europe, the world's offshore technology leader.
Many offshore wind projects are still at the planning stage. The report claims that if all were completed, they'd provide 10% of the EU's electricity.
Theoretically, 8 offshore wind farms spanning 100 by 100 kilometers would be sufficient to supply all countries in the European Union with clean electricity. So we are especially glad that many political leaders have understood this message.
And as more offshore wind farms are constructed, the European Wind Energy Association has now set a target to provide some 4% of EU electricity consumption from offshore generation by the end of the next decade. That's an average growth of almost 30% each year.
We've launched a declaration today at the offshore conference. It's part of a wider campaign, firstly to raise awareness about the opportunities that offshore wind have to offer here in Europe, but also to drive home the message to decision makers that action needs to be taken urgently.
With Sweden holding the European presidency, Deputy Prime Minister Maud Olofsson stressed the need for member states to work together if they are to achieve EU targets.
These commitments will dramatically increase the use of renewable energy in each country within the Union and set legally enforceable targets for governments to achieve. To me, it is clear that offshore wind power has a fantastic potential and will be very important for Europe's strive towards meeting the 2020 targets.
Delegates to the conference in Stockholm have been discussing what industry and governments, including the EU, need to do to harness Europe's huge offshore wind potential and create a new industry with millions of new jobs.
Renewable energy could well give jobs to more than 2.8 million citizens in Europe. For each megawatt installed, around 7.5 jobs are created directly in the wind industry. And some estimates suggest the total effect is roughly twice that. Offshore wind will be a growing part of that.
The UK is leading the way in offshore wind generation, with Verbo Bank wind farm in Liverpool Bay already celebrating its first anniversary. But even more ambitious schemes have been agreed.
When it comes to offshore wind, the UK is now the world leader in connected capacity of energy. And we've done that as part of a determined effort to increase the proportion of our electricity that we take from renewable energy sources.
The industry has made its call to action. They're determined to harness the power of offshore wind, but say they need the support of politicians to make their goal a reality.